In this video, I'll be talking all about variable capacitors. I've got a few different kinds to show you, including these tuning capacitors from vintage radios, as well as a few more modern examples like these ones here. I'll talk a little bit about their history, how they work, how you can measure their capacitance value, and I'll also talk about some common faults to look for when troubleshooting and repairing them. Before I begin, remember that a capacitor is just an electronic component that can store electrical energy in an electric field, and it does that by accumulating charges on two conductive plates, which are then separated by an insulator of some description. Variable capacitors are, just as the name implies, a capacitor whose value is not fixed, it's variable, and it can be adjusted typically by turning a knob, a shaft, or a screw. When it comes to variable capacitors, there are two fundamental designs, those with air being the dielectric and others with a solid insulator as the dielectric. Both are based on the same principle though, which is that a moving plate can slide in front of a fixed plate with some form of dielectric insulator between them, or that a moving plate can change the distance from a fixed plate, still with a dielectric material between them. Now, to understand that concept better, let's start by taking a closer look at the air variable capacitor. You don't really see variable capacitors like these nowadays, and the simple explanation for that is that by about the 1970s through to maybe the 1980s, they'd mostly been made redundant. They were replaced with more modern components and designs. But these were once very common, and they were primarily developed for tuning radio circuits. And so a good source for these, if you're looking to get your hands on some, is to salvage them straight from old broken radios. That includes things like AM/FM radios, ham radios, shortwave receivers, and other radio-related circuits. All of the ones I've collected here were picked up at auction or salvaged from vintage radios that were destined for landfill. The majority of these would date from about the early 1920s through to the 50s. And as their name suggests, being an air variable capacitor, this particular design uses the air gap as the dielectric between the two sets of intermeshed metal plates. This type of capacitor is not polarized, and the material used to construct the metal plates can vary. Some of the better quality ones I have here are actually made from bronze. The shape of the plates can also vary, but are often a semicircle or something similar, and that gives a linear relationship between the capacitance value and the rotation angle of the shaft. That said, you will sometimes see more complex plate shapes. These are often offset from the axis, or plates are designed to produce a specific capacitance result for tuning things like resonance circuits. The number and size of the plates can vary too, depending on their intended use, as can the distance between the plates. The capacitance value is always going to be quite small on these, likely somewhere between 10 picofarads and 1000 picofarads. Also worth noting, due to the dielectric constant of air, is that the capacitance value is very stable over a wide temperature range. Another design variable to consider with these is the maximum voltage rating, and that really depends on the capacitor's physical size, and because we're using air as the dielectric, the distance between the plates. Note that one set of plates is fixed and doesn't move, and this is called the stator. Also note that these are mounted to the frame, usually with ceramic insulators. The other set is called the rotor, and that's attached to a rotating shaft, which then moves the rotor plates together in alignment. When I turn the shaft, I can adjust the amount of overlapping surface area between the fixed stator plates and the adjustable rotor plates. This, in turn, adjusts the capacitance value, which you can see being measured here by my LCR meter. When the sets of plates are completely overlapped, we achieve the maximum capacitance value of the capacitor. And as we turn the rotor the other way, the plates will disengage from each other and the capacitance value will lower right down to something near zero. Reduction gears and backlash gears are often seen on higher quality components. Reduction gears in particular were used as they allow for finer tuning, so that when you turn the knob, it drives much smaller incremental adjustments, allowing you to fine-tune radio frequencies. And another thing worth noting here is that the rotors of several variable capacitors can be combined on a common shaft to form what was called a gang or ganged capacitor. And a ganged capacitor functions in exactly the same way, just with multiple sections rotating on the same shaft, each with its own stator and rotor, connected to a single common shaft, which then allows for them to be tuned together. As an example of this, here's a 2-gang capacitor and a 3-gang capacitor. These were often used in AM and FM radios, with one section of the capacitor used to tune the RF input and the other to set something like the oscillator frequency. More advanced receivers sometimes use two sections to tune the RF input by using a 3-gang capacitor. And then there were other configurations too, where the capacitance of one section may increase while the other decreases as you turn the shaft. And again, all of these were designed specifically to match the tuning needs of the intended radio circuit. Now let's take a quick look at these solid dielectric variable capacitors. And these are much smaller, more modern, and are usually enclosed in plastic, and so we can't see the internal plates moving. The solid dielectric usually uses a mica sheet, plastic film, or sometimes polyester foil as the insulator between the moving plates and the fixed plate. And these were commonly found in more modern transistor radios and other related equipment. Some of the obvious advantages over earlier designs are their much smaller size and weight, but some disadvantages come with this design. They're not nearly as robust, and they can introduce noise into your circuit. The middle output pin is common, with the other pins producing a different capacitance range as shown here. Some capacitors in this solid dielectric category also include things like this much smaller trimmer capacitor, which are adjustable with this very small screw you can see here, and we can fine tune the capacitance range with that screw as needed. These tiny trimmer capacitors are still widely available, and they're designed for making very fine in-circuit adjustments or for compensating for slight changes over time. Unlike some of the previous designs, these are really intended and designed on the basis that you're going to set their value and then leave it, with only minor adjustments needed over time. Trimmer capacitors are usually designed for mounting on circuit boards and can be sourced as both surface mount and through-hole components. At first glance, they can be kind of hard to tell apart from things like trimmer potentiometers, and they do look quite similar visually. So the dielectric materials used in these, very similar to these ones here, usually use something like mica, ceramic, or plastic as the insulator. The maximum capacitance value of these typically won't exceed about 150 picofarads. Quality components sometimes have their value printed on them, and some manufacturers even use a color code to indicate the capacitance range of that specific trimmer. There is, however, no common or universal code for these, and so red, for example, could actually be one of two completely different value ranges depending on the manufacturer. So unless you know for sure who manufactured your trimmers, or only have components from one manufacturer and you're familiar with their color code system, you may need to actually measure their range manually before using it in your circuit. Now, let's go back to the air variable capacitor, and we'll talk a little bit about testing and repairing some common faults with these. The distance between plates is typically less than 2 millimeters, and so when you consider that some of these are nearly 100 years old, it's not really that surprising that they sustain some kind of damage over time. The main problem you're likely to encounter with these air variable components are basically shorts between the plates, where they've been dinged, bent, dropped, or corroded after being removed from a radio. Bent plates can restrict the movement partially or even entirely, like with this one here. The plates are so severely wedged together that I can't currently turn that shaft at all. A similar fault can occur when it comes to modern capacitors, where the screw has been over-tightened, causing damage to the internal plates, and that can actually cause permanent damage to the component. Essentially, we're creating a short circuit between the rotor section and the stator sections, which can either cause noise or even a complete loss of signal. In extreme cases, turning that tuning shaft will have no apparent effect because of a short circuit like this. Sometimes identifying this kind of short can be done visually because the damage is very obvious. But to test for this, we essentially want to isolate the capacitor from the circuit, and then we can measure the resistance between the stator and the rotor plates. For it to be considered a good unit, the resistance value should be infinite. So what we mean by that is no continuity at any of its adjustment positions. To test for this, we should put one of the multimeter test leads on the rotor terminal and the other on the stator terminal. You can then slowly rotate the rotor plates back and forth while monitoring for any signs of a short. Using the multimeter in continuity mode again, I'll connect the leads to the rotor and stator terminals. By slowly rotating the shaft and listening for the audible beep, I can easily detect the points where one or more rotor fins are shorting against the fixed stator plates. I'll repeat this process a couple of times just to pinpoint the exact spots where damaged fins are making contact. And once identified, I can carefully make some minor adjustments, essentially bending the damaged fins back into their correct position and hopefully eliminating the short circuit. I can then use the multimeter again to verify that the repair worked and that there is no longer a short between each section of the capacitor. Okay, this one looks good. Next, I'll move the capacitor back to the LCR meter and monitor the capacitance value as I slowly turn the shaft again through its entire range. The goal here is just to ensure the capacitance increases smoothly without any sudden jumps. And although this capacitor still needs a clean, it is functional again. Now, let's use a gained capacitor as another test example. Again, using the continuity function on the multimeter, we should see no continuity or short between each stator section, as shown here. One exception to this is that you may come across examples where multiple stators have been wired together, effectively connecting multiple capacitors in parallel to increase the total capacitance. If your capacitor has wires linking the stator terminals, you would expect the opposite of what I'm showing here, and there would be continuity between each stator section. If I take a reading between each section of the rotors, we see there is continuity, and as shown earlier, these rotor plates or fins are all connected together along the shaft, so this is in spec and exactly what we want to see. It's also normal to find continuity between the rotor plates, the shaft, and the outer chassis. The chassis is usually grounded elsewhere to the main device. Where we don't want to find a short, however, is between the stator and the chassis, as that would effectively short the entire component. If I flip this over, you can see the insulating spaces between each stator section and the metal chassis. And once again, using the multimeter, we can verify that there is no short present. Restoring damaged capacitors might be a topic best saved for another video, but here's a few things to consider. A thin blade or tweezers can be used for carefully straightening and bending plates back into place. If your capacitor is in need of cleaning, I'd start with something like compressed air and a soft brush just to remove some of the light corrosion and crud that can build up on these. If there's more serious corrosion, you might need to try something like isopropyl alcohol for cleaning both the contacts and the frame. Contact cleaner can be useful as well for removing oxidization from the contacts. More extreme cleaning needs, you might move up to something like warm soapy water, a brush, and an ultrasonic cleaner. That can be very effective as well. If you do go the water and ultrasonic route, always make sure that you dry it out completely afterwards and then lubricate any bearings or shaft bushings. You can do that with a little bit of machine oil or sewing machine oil. That will usually do the trick. Try to avoid using grease because it can be conductive, but if you are going to use that on something like the bearings, go with something like this. You'll sometimes encounter more rusted frames like this one, and a small amount of WD-40 used on the frame with a little bit of fine sandpaper can help with restoring the frame condition. Feel free to ask questions in the comments. If there's anything I've glossed over or you think I've missed, feel free to share your experiences too. I'd love to read them. And if you've made it this far into the video, thanks for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, please leave a comment, like the video, and click subscribe.